Have you ever watched a moment unfold at an airport that made your heart stop? Picture this. A young black boy, just 14 years old, clutching a small carry-on, standing at the bustling check-in counter of Delta Airlines at John F. Kennedy International Airport. Tension ripples across the waiting area as two stern security officers approach him, their gazes piercing with suspicion. No one else is stopped, no alarms beep. Yet they pull him aside as if his presence alone is enough to question his right to fly. What could they possibly find in his bag? And why does it leave everyone reeling in shock? Ethan Morrison was no ordinary 14-year-old. Hailing from a humble neighborhood in Brooklyn, he was raised by his grandmother, Loretta Morrison, a steadfast woman who had worked 2 jobs ever since her daughter Ethan's mother passed away from a heart condition when he was just 5. Loretta believed deeply in the power of education and opportunity. She had saved every spare dollar for one purpose: to send Ethan to a summer leadership program in Chicago, an endeavor that promised scholarships, mentorships, and possibly a brighter future. The morning of Ethan's flight to Chicago, the sun peeked through the window of their small apartment, dancing across the worn-out carpet. Loretta had already prepared a hearty breakfast of scrambled eggs, crispy bacon and toast with a slather of butter. But Ethan was too nervous to eat more than a few bites. He fiddled with the silver chain around his neck, a precious heirloom that had belonged to his late mother. Today, it felt heavier than usual. "I'm so proud of you, baby," Loretta whispered, cupping Ethan's face. "You've worked so hard for this opportunity. Just remember everything I taught you. Be polite, be respectful, and never forget who you are." Ethan nodded. "Yes, Grandma. I'll make you proud." They hailed a taxi to JFK Airport. The driver, a middle-aged man who reeked of coffee, flicked the radio between channels, occasionally glancing at the pair in his rearview mirror. Ethan hugged a small backpack tightly on his lap. Inside were neatly rolled clothes, a few notebooks, and the biggest surprise of all, a special keepsake from his grandmother. He wasn't quite sure if he should open it now, or wait until he arrived in Chicago. At the terminal, Loretta gave Ethan one final hug. She was supposed to escort him to the gate, but Ethan, determined to prove his independence, insisted he could manage the check-in process on his own. They parted ways with tearful eyes and hopeful hearts, believing the world that awaited Ethan was big, bright, and full of promise. As Ethan approached the self-check-in kiosk, he noticed the swirling crowd, families, juggling oversized luggage, business travelers in crisp suits, tapping away on their phones, and exhausted tourists rummaging for passports in backpacks, stuffed with souvenirs. Amidst the commotion, Ethan's innocent excitement began to grow into cautious anticipation. He printed his boarding pass and proceeded to the bag drop counter. A tall security officer, sporting a navy blue uniform and a name badge that read Officer Grant, stood nearby. Grant eyed every person that walked by, but when he saw Ethan, his stare seemed to sharpen. Suddenly it felt like the noise of the airport dulled, and the boy became aware of people's looks, curious, dismissive, or hurried. But there was something more piercing in Grant's gaze. Nevertheless, Ethan stepped up to the counter to hand over his small suitcase. The airline representative smiled politely and asked for his ID. Ethan presented the only form of identification. He had a school ID card and a copy of his birth certificate. The agent nodded, typed in some details, and then turned to place a tag on the suitcase. It was all standard procedure, or so it seemed, until Officer Grant suddenly loomed behind the desk, peering over the agent's shoulder. "Is there a problem?" Officer asked the airline agent, her voice tight with confusion. "I'd like to check this young man's bag." Grant declared in a tone that brooked no argument. Ethan's heart thumped wildly. He couldn't imagine what could be so suspicious about him. He was only carrying clothing and some personal items for his trip. He swallowed hard and mustered up the courage to speak politely. "But officer, why do you need to check my bag?" His voice wavered slightly, trying to mask the fear creeping in. Grant offered no explanation, just a curt nod to two other security agents standing by. They walked around the counter, their expressions blank, businesslike. The airline representative frowned, but she knew better than to argue with security. Ethan stood dumbfounded, cheeks growing warm, uncertain whether to protest or comply. As the security agents pulled the suitcase aside, Grant motioned Ethan to follow them down a corridor leading to a screening room. The corridor felt excessively long. Passengers craned their necks to watch the spectacle of an innocent boy being escorted by multiple officers, but none stepped forward to object or intervene. Ethan's palms grew sweaty as he gripped his backpack. He could only imagine what might happen next. Anxiety gnawed at him, and a quiet question buzzed in his head. Was he being singled out because of his skin color? The screening room was cramped and harshly lit by fluorescent lights that buzzed incessantly. There was a metal table in the center, a stack of latex gloves and several security monitors flickering with images of luggage scans. A large sign on the wall spelled out, "Transportation Security Administration, TSA. Authorized personnel only." Despite his young age, Ethan felt the gravity of the situation. Officer Grant closed the door and spoke curtly. "Put your backpack on the table and open it, please." Ethan obeyed, unzipping the bag. His neatly folded shirts and pants spilled out, along with the notebooks and the sealed envelope from Grandma Loretta. The second officer, whose badge read Officer Mills, rummaged through the clothing, feeling around the pockets, checking each garment with silent efficiency. They pulled out the envelope. It was a yellowish rectangle with an old-fashioned wax seal. Officer Grant turned it over suspiciously in his gloved hands. "What's in here?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. Ethan responded, "It's a gift from my grandmother. She told me not to open it until I got to Chicago." His voice trembled slightly, but he tried to keep it steady, not wanting to show fear. Officer Grant scoffed. "You don't know what's inside." He lifted the envelope as if it might contain something explosive. No, sir," Ethan stammered. I don't." Without asking for permission, Grant tore the wax seal. The ripping sound echoed like a cruel violation in the small room. Ethan's heart seized. That envelope was personal. It was from his grandmother, a symbol of love and guidance for this new journey. Watching it forced open without so much as a second thought felt wrong, but he had no power to protest. As Grant slid a sheet of paper out of the envelope, all eyes fell upon him. He unfolded it with deliberate slowness. Silence blanketed the room. Even the fluorescent lights seemed to buzz louder in anticipation. The officers read, and their expressions shifted subtly. Confusion, followed by curiosity, then annoyance. The letter read, "My beloved grandson, Ethan. You have a bright future ahead of you. Do not let this world tell you otherwise." Inside this envelope is something that kept me going when things were hardest for me. I hope you will find comfort and strength in its words. Keep it close to your heart, and remember that love and perseverance outshine the darkest moments. Forever proud, Grandma Loretta. Officer Mills shook his head and moved to check the rest of the bag. "Looks clean," he remarked quietly. Grant, however, was not appeased. He stared at Ethan, then at the letter like he was searching for hidden code. The tension in the air was thick. After a moment, Grant brusquely folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. He placed it on the table with a dismissive grunt. "We'll finish this in a minute," he said, nodding at Mills to open the suitcase next. Mills unzipped Ethan's small suitcase on the table. Inside were mostly typical items: t-shirts, jeans, pajamas, a toothbrush, and a small pack of toiletries. But near the top lay a clumsily gift-wrapped box. This too had come from Grandma Loretta, though in a separate moment of maternal fussing. Ethan knew what it was, her famous homemade chocolate chip cookies for the new friends Ethan might meet at the leadership program. She had given them to him that very morning, saying, "Share these. That's how you make lifelong friends." Grant tore off the wrapping paper without ceremony, revealing a simple plastic container brimming with cookies. "What's this?" he asked, though the answer was obvious. "Food. You can't just be carrying things like this around." Mills took one cookie and broke it in half, as if it might reveal contraband inside. Crumbs scattered across the table. Finding nothing more sinister than chocolate chips, he dropped it into a nearby trash bin with a look of disinterest. Ethan's eyes widened as he watched the remains of a precious homemade cookie tossed away. His frustration began to bubble. In his mind, he thought, "This is too far." He could see that these officers were determined to find something, anything, to justify their invasive search. He mustered the courage to ask, "Why are you doing this to me, sir?" His voice wavered, but there was steel in his gaze. "Is there a reason you think I'm dangerous?" Officer Grant turned sharply, looking Ethan up and down. His voice was as cold as the stale air in the room. "We have to ensure safety. Everyone is subject to checks." Mills, trying to keep the situation from boiling over, interjected, "It's just standard procedure, kid." But Ethan wasn't convinced. The suspicious eyes, the way they tore through his belongings, the assumption that a boy like him might be hiding something, it all painted a very different picture. He felt singled out and humiliated. Ethan and the officers spent another tense 15 minutes going through every last inch of his luggage. When Mills finally sighed and closed the suitcase, he nodded at Grant. "Nothing here," he said, matter-of-factly. "He's clear." Grant frowned, as though disappointed that they hadn't found any reason to detain Ethan. Mills left the room, and Grant shot one final glare at the boy, the letter still clutched in his hand. Ethan couldn't stand the sight Officer Grant holding his grandmother's words so carelessly. Mustering courage, he spoke up, voice quivering slightly with anger. "That's mine," he said. "You've read it. You know it's personal." Grant seemed to pause. A flicker of realization or guilt crossed his face before he quickly handed the envelope back. "You can go," he snapped, as though offering mercy. Ethan clutched it close to his heart, feeling both relief and indignation. Then, with shaky hands, he put his grandmother's letter back into his backpack, alongside his notebooks. Mills returned, handing Ethan his boarding pass. "Flight boards in 20 minutes. You should hurry," he said, somewhat apologetically, but not quite. Ethan swallowed the knot in his throat and gathered his things. His mind whirled with confusion and hurt. He'd never felt so small, so powerless. This was supposed to be an exciting day. His first flight alone, his chance at a summer program that might change his life. Instead, it felt like a cruel preview of how the world might treat him, because of what he looked like. Exiting the screening room, Ethan clutched the handle of his suitcase. Part of him wanted to run, to just get on the plane as fast as possible and leave this humiliating experience behind. But another part wanted to stand there and scream, to demand an apology, to ask every bystander why they hadn't spoken up. Did no one think this was wrong? He took a moment to compose himself and noticed a mother and her son watching from afar, their expressions uncertain. They glanced at Ethan with something akin to pity. For a split second, he thought he might see them step forward, say something, but they simply turned away and walked to their gate. Ethan felt a hollow ache in his chest, realizing how easy it was for people to ignore injustice, especially when it was happening to someone else. As Ethan navigated toward the gate, he tried to shake off the unsettling experience. He passed by gift shops brimming with overpriced souvenirs, newsstands displaying headlines about the upcoming election, and a cafe teeming with bleary-eyed travelers guzzling coffee. Despite the hustle and bustle, he couldn't get the image of Officer Grant's suspicious stare out of his head. Then he noticed a tall man in a business suit standing near a charging station. The man caught Ethan's gaze and offered a gentle nod. Unsure why, Ethan slowed his steps. Something about the stranger's posture seemed inviting. His name tag read, Anthony Russell, Chicago City Council. "Hey there," the man said, his tone friendly. "I saw what happened back there. You okay?" Ethan hesitated, scanning the area to make sure no security guard was lurking. I guess so," he replied, voice soft. It was embarrassing. Anthony sighed, adjusting his tie. "Unfortunately, it happens far too often. The important thing is, are you all set for your flight now?" "Yes," Ethan said. "I have my boarding pass. Just need to head to gate B22. Anthony looked at his watch. "You still have some time. I'm on the same flight to Chicago. Why don't we walk together?" There was a warmth in the man's eyes that made Ethan feel safe, a sense of solidarity he'd been craving since the humiliating ordeal. During the walk, Anthony asked Ethan about his trip. Hesitantly at first, Ethan told him about the leadership program. Before long, Ethan found himself sharing his dreams of going to college, of creating a mentorship group for kids in underprivileged neighborhoods, of maybe one day becoming a pilot to explore the world. "You've got big dreams, and that's great," Anthony replied, smiling. "When I was your age, I didn't think I had many options, but I worked hard, stayed focused, and eventually got into public service. If you ever need advice or just someone to talk to, look me up in Chicago." They reached gate B22, where a queue had already formed. Anthony gave Ethan a small business card. "I mean it," he said, offering a gentle pat on the boy's shoulder. "Look me up. And don't let this morning color your view of the entire world. Some of us are rooting for you." Ethan thanked him, feeling a spark of hope rekindle. Perhaps not everyone would treat him with suspicion. Perhaps amidst the cynicism, there were allies, people who looked out for each other, who believed in fairness and justice. Boarding the plane felt like entering a whole new realm. The hum of the engines, the mechanical whir of the jet bridge, and the hurried flight attendants directing passengers to their seats all seemed to usher Ethan into a transitional space between the heartbreak of the morning and whatever awaited him in Chicago. He found his seat 23A by the window. Settling in, he noticed an elderly white woman in the aisle seat. She offered a polite smile before returning to her puzzle book. Anthony Russell was several rows ahead, evidently in business class, but he glanced back once to send an encouraging nod in Ethan's direction. As the plane filled up, Ethan's mind began to wander. He thought about calling Grandma Loretta to let her know he was all right, but the flight attendants soon announced that all electronic devices must be switched to airplane mode. It would have to wait until they landed. The last thing he wanted was to worry her. The plane started its taxi and Ethan gripped the armrest. It was his first time flying, and a swirl of nerves mingled with excitement in his stomach. The roar of the engines grew louder. Then in a sudden surge, the aircraft sped down the runway. His heart leapt as the plane lifted off the ground. For a moment, everything else melted away. He was actually flying. The exhilaration made him forget the humiliations of the morning. Once the plane leveled off in the sky, the flight attendants started their drink service. Ethan asked for a ginger ale, hoping to calm his fluttering stomach. He pulled out the letter from Grandma Loretta, rereading her words about perseverance and love. As he read, a tear of gratitude threatened to escape. He quickly brushed it away, not wanting to show emotion in the cramped space. Then, from the corner of his eye, he noticed a commotion a few rows ahead. A tall figure in the aisle was speaking tersely to a flight attendant. Ethan craned his neck and realized with a start it was Officer Grant, the same security officer who had humiliated him. Confusion coursed through him. Why was he on the same flight? Could it be just a coincidence? Grant's face looked strained, and he was rummaging through the overhead bin as though searching for something. The flight attendant was politely insisting he take his seat. It seemed out of place for a security officer to travel in uniform unless he was on official duty. The sight made Ethan uneasy, but he forced himself to look away, telling himself it was just bad luck. He tried to concentrate on the in-flight magazine. However, as the flight progressed, he could feel Grant's gaze drifting his way from time to time. Each time, Ethan pretended not to notice, focusing instead on his grandmother's letter or the instructions for the leadership program. 1,000 questions buzzed in his mind. Why is he on this flight? Is he following me? Did he find something suspicious after all? He tried to dismiss the thoughts. But deep in his gut, Ethan felt the tension rising again, like a dark cloud, threatening to overshadow the promise of a fresh start in Chicago. Halfway through the flight, the pilot announced that they would experience some mild turbulence. Seatbelt lights blinked on, and the cabin began to jostle. Ethan's heart raced at every bump, but he tried to breathe, remembering advice he'd read online. Stay calm, keep your seatbelt fastened, and focus on something stable. He locked his eyes on the seatback in front of him, trying to quell the rising panic in his chest. Officer Grant was seated on the opposite side, a few rows ahead. Each time Ethan peeked that way, he saw Grant fidgeting anxiously, gripping his armrests. Perhaps the man was uncomfortable with flying, or maybe he was just on edge, for reasons Ethan couldn't fathom. Suddenly the plane dropped slightly, and a collective gasp filled the cabin. The elderly lady next to Ethan nearly dropped her puzzle book. The flight attendants announced calmly to remain seated. Another jolt, then a shuddering roar as the plane strove to stabilize. Anxiety spread like a ripple through the passengers. Some clutched their seats. Others murmured prayers under their breath. Ethan gripped the letter from Grandma Loretta, scanning her words like a talisman. He thought about how she'd said love and perseverance outshine the darkest moments. As the plane shook, he repeated those lines in his head like a mantra. Slowly the turbulence subsided, and the cabin breathed a collective sigh of relief. In the wake of the turbulence, an unexpected camaraderie blossomed among passengers. Strangers began comforting each other. People who hadn't exchanged a single word suddenly offered sympathetic smiles or reassuring pats on the hand. Even the flight attendants seemed more personal, asking each passenger if they were all right. Yet Officer Grant remained an island of tension. He stared straight ahead, refusing to engage with the flight attendants who offered him water. Ethan caught a glance of him once more, and for a fleeting second, Grant's gaze held something akin to worry, even fear. Ethan felt a confusing pang of empathy. The man who had humiliated him that morning was clearly troubled. Despite his resentment, Ethan couldn't help but wonder what weighed on Grant's mind. After the turbulence eased, a gentle hush fell over the cabin. Some passengers attempted to nap, while others went back to their books or headphones. Ethan tried to immerse himself in the in-flight magazine, flipping through stories of exotic destinations and reading about recommended restaurants in Chicago. About an hour before landing, the seatbelt sign turned off, and people began making their way to the lavatories. When Ethan got up to stretch, he noticed Officer Grant standing near the back galley. Their eyes met for a split second. Ethan hesitated, torn between slipping away silently and confronting the man who had invaded his privacy so profoundly just hours earlier. Before he could decide, Grant spoke. "Hey," he said, sounding almost civil. His tone was subdued, lacking the sharp edge of authority Ethan had heard in the security room. Ethan swallowed, stepping closer on unsteady legs. "Yes, officer," he replied, voice quiet. Grant exhaled, running a hand over his short, cropped hair. I just wanted to say that, it's nothing personal. What happened at the airport, it was protocol." A flash of anger warmed Ethan's cheeks. "Protocol. Felt pretty personal to me," he said, noticing how his voice trembled. "You treated me like a criminal." Grant's posture stiffened. He glanced around, ensuring no one else was listening. "Look," he began, forcing a calm tone. "We get training, we get alerts about possible threats, and we have to do our jobs. Sometimes we have to be cautious." Ethan's stare was unwavering, though a swirl of conflicting emotions churned inside him. "And do those threat alerts specifically mention teenage boys who happen to look like me?" Grant's jaw clenched. He tried to maintain his composure. "That's not what I said. You didn't have to say it." Ethan interrupted, his voice rising slightly before he consciously lowered it again. He remembered his grandmother's advice: be respectful, but never be silent about what's right. So he continued quieter. "You made me feel small, like I was guilty before I even said a word." A flicker of remorse crossed Grant's face. For a moment he looked like he wanted to explain himself more, but no words came, only a slow, reluctant nod. "Maybe he started, but the overhead speaker crackled to life, announcing the plane's descent into Chicago O'Hare International Airport. Grant turned away, as if grateful for the interruption. Ethan returned to his seat, heart hammering. He felt a sense of vindication in having spoken his mind, albeit briefly. Yet he also sensed there was more to Grant's story, some hidden weight. But the flight was ending, and Ethan had bigger things to focus on: a new city, a leadership program, and the chance to prove that the prejudice he'd faced wouldn't define him. The landing in Chicago was smooth, and the plane taxied to the gate under overcast skies. As passengers started deplaning, Ethan gathered his backpack and the envelope from Grandma Loretta. The elderly lady in the aisle seat offered him a kind goodbye, but no one else spoke directly to him. Stepping into O'Hare's bustling concourse felt like entering a foreign land. Signs for local attractions and connecting flights glowed overhead. Business travelers rushed by, and families tried to corral energetic children. The swirl of motion made Ethan momentarily dizzy. Anthony Russell caught up to him by the exit. "You made it," he said with a bright grin. "How was your flight?" Ethan gave a small shrug. "A bit bumpy, but I'm okay." Anthony nodded. "O'Hare can be overwhelming. Let me walk you to the baggage claim." They navigated through the corridors, passing gift shops, fast food joints, and coffee stands. Ethan felt relief just having Anthony's reassuring presence alongside him. But one moment threatened to shatter his newfound calm, glimpsing Officer Grant again, heading in the opposite direction, eyes cast downward. This time Grant didn't even look up. It seemed almost symbolic, like he wanted to distance himself from Ethan now that the flight was over. At the baggage carousel, Anthony gave Ethan his phone number. "If you need any help settling in, or just want to talk, call me. I might be busy with council duties, but I'll find time for you." "Okay," Ethan nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. "Thank you. I really appreciate it." As they parted ways, Ethan couldn't shake the morning's events, but he felt a glimmer of hope that not everyone in authority was out to demean him. Tucking Anthony's card safely in his wallet, he resolved to focus on the future. Chicago was a new chapter, and he wanted to make the most of it. The Chicago Leadership Academy was housed in a modern, glass-fronted building near the city's downtown area. Large banners adorned the entrance, declaring the Academy's motto, "Empower, Educate, Elevate." Ethan's heart fluttered with excitement as he walked through the doors, dragging his small suitcase behind him. Inside the reception area, buzzed with the energy of young people from all over the country. Some were exchanging awkward introductions, while others reunited like old friends. Ethan found his name on a registration list, received a welcome packet, and was assigned a dorm room on the 3rd floor. The next few days were a whirlwind of orientation sessions, team-building exercises, and inspirational talks from community leaders. Ethan embraced every moment, determined to absorb as much as he could. He quickly befriended a group of students who shared his passion for social justice: Aisha from Detroit, Liam from Seattle, and Carlos from Miami. They bonded over late-night brainstorming sessions on how to tackle challenges like youth violence, community policing, and educational inequality. Each day, Ethan remembered his grandmother's words, "Never forget who you are." He wore that conviction on his sleeve, sharing his background openly, even the painful parts. To his surprise, his openness resonated with many peers, and soon he earned a reputation as a thoughtful, empathetic leader. He felt he'd found his tribe, his community of change-makers. But late at night, when the dorm lights dimmed, his mind drifted back to the airport incident. He couldn't quite shake the sting of Officer Grant's suspicions. In group discussions about racial profiling, Ethan shared his personal experience, igniting passionate debates. Some of his peers had faced similar ordeals, validating Ethan's feelings. Others questioned whether there was more to the story, prompting Ethan to wonder if he had jumped to conclusions about Grant. Yet each time he replayed the memory, the sting of prejudice felt undeniable. One afternoon, about 2 weeks into the program, Ethan's phone buzzed unexpectedly while he was eating lunch in the cafeteria. He looked at the caller ID. It was an unknown Chicago number. Curious, he answered, stepping outside to a quiet corner. "Is this Ethan Morrison?" asked a clipped, familiar voice. "Yes. Who's this?" A slight pause. "It's Grant. Officer Grant. From JFK." Ethan's heart soared into his throat. "Officer Grant. How did you get my number?" he managed to ask, trying to keep his voice calm. "Listen," Grant said hurriedly. "I need to talk to you. It's important." A swirl of suspicion and anger flared in Ethan's mind. "Why should I talk to you? After how you treated me. I'm not sure there's anything else to say." Grant's voice lowered. "I know I messed up. I just need a chance to explain. I looked you up through some connections, found out you were attending a program in Chicago. This is about your safety, please trust me on that." "My safety?" Ethan's skepticism deepened. "Look, I'm not sure what you're trying to pull, but I'm doing fine here. I don't need you interfering. You can meet me in a public place if that makes you feel safer. There's a cafe near the Academy Cafe Delgado on West Monroe Street. Please. Tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. Ethan hesitated. He glanced at the lounge doors through which his new friends were busy discussing the next workshop. Every nerve in his body screamed caution, yet a nagging curiosity took hold, fueled by Grant's cryptic words about Ethan's safety. Could there be more to this story than the prejudice he exhaled slowly, heart-pounding? "All right," he said, barely believing his own words. "But if this is some kind of trick—" "It's not," Grant cut in, sounding almost desperate. "Thank you." The call ended, leaving Ethan with a swirl of emotions. He pocketed his phone, returning to his friends with a distracted look that didn't go unnoticed. Aisha asked if he was all right. He mustered a half-smile and nodded, deciding it was best not to mention anything yet. He didn't want to alarm them, especially if this meeting turned out to be nothing. The next day, Ethan sat at a small table in Cafe Delgado, a cozy spot known for its strong espresso and artistic latte foam designs. The place was moderately busy, a reassuring sign that there would be plenty of witnesses if something went awry. He nursed a hot chocolate, scanning each face that walked through the door. At exactly 3 p.m., Officer Grant appeared. This time he wore civilian clothes, dark jeans, and a plain grey t-shirt. Without the uniform, he looked oddly human, almost vulnerable. He spotted Ethan and approached with a stiff nod. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly. Ethan just nodded, refusing to break the silence. Grant took a seat across from him, fiddling with the sugar packets on the table. After an awkward pause, he finally spoke. "I owe you an apology. The way I treated you at JFK wasn't right. I singled you out. It wasn't just protocol." Hearing the admission, Ethan's chest tightened. Why, he demanded, swallowing the anger that threatened to burst. "Why me?" Grant glanced around as though worried someone might be eavesdropping. "This is going to sound crazy," he began, voice tinged with regret. "But I'd received a tip that morning about a young male courier traveling alone. The tip was vague, no name, no photo. Just that he was carrying something potentially dangerous. The only descriptor was that he was black." Ethan's stomach dropped, the familiar sting of racial profiling burning anew. "So you assumed it had to be me?" Grant lowered his head. "Yes. And I've come to learn that the tip was bogus, or at least not reliable. But I didn't question it at the time. That's on me, I'm sorry." Ethan clenched his jaw, remembering the humiliation he'd felt. "And now you're here, because you suddenly have a conscience." Grant shook his head. "It's more than that. After I got back to New York, I looked into that tip. It came from an encrypted source, but I traced some details. It wasn't about you specifically, but about someone traveling with a coded flash drive, maybe containing stolen information. I found out it actually pointed to Chicago, someone who might be connected to that leadership program you're in. I don't have official jurisdiction here, but I couldn't let it go." Ethan frowned. The story sounded far-fetched, yet Grant's earnest tone piqued his curiosity. "What does that have to do with me?" "I'm not sure," Grant admitted, rubbing his temple in frustration. "But I know you're there, and if there's any chance the real suspect is among your peers, I figured you should know. You're a good kid. Didn't deserve what happened. The least I can do is warn you." A swirl of confusion clouded Ethan's thoughts. The leadership program was full of bright students, future leaders. Could one of them be smuggling stolen data? The idea seemed preposterous, yet Grant's intensity was unsettling. Ethan exhaled slowly. Even if this is true, why come to me? Why not the local police or the directors of the program? Grant grimaced. The information I dug up is off the record. I can't exactly bring it to my superiors without risking my job. They'd want to know how I got it in the first place. But I wanted to do something, at least warn you. I know you don't trust me, but watch your back. If you see anything suspicious, call me. He slid a slip of paper with his personal phone number across the table. Ethan stared at it for a long moment. He felt a conflicting swirl of emotions. Anger at the unwarranted suspicion, grudging respect that Grant was trying to make amends, and a hint of unease about the possibility of a real threat. Slowly, he pocketed the number. Grant rose from his seat, leaving a $5 bill on the table for his untouched coffee. Before walking away, he paused. Again, I'm sorry, Ethan. The world isn't always fair, and sometimes we make it worse by our own biases. I wish you luck. Ethan watched him go, the half-drunk hot chocolate growing cold on the table. Nothing in the past 2 weeks could have prepared him for this revelation. As he stepped out of the cafe, the Chicago air felt heavier, weighed down by a new suspicion. Could someone in the leadership program be harboring a dangerous secret? Back at the academy, Ethan found it nearly impossible to focus on the afternoon workshops. Each time he looked at his fellow students, a nagging question surfaced. Could it be them? He hated the feeling, the paranoia that was creeping in, making him question the goodness of the people around him. His roommate Carlos noticed his distracted demeanor. Yo, you all right, man? You've been quiet all afternoon. Ethan forced a smile. Just got a lot on my mind, I guess. Thinking about a project we're doing. All right, well, if you need someone to bounce ideas off, let me know. Carlos offered, patting him on the shoulder. That evening, as they gathered in the common area, the group chatted happily about an upcoming field trip to a local tech incubator. Aisha was excited because she wanted to study cybersecurity. Liam was more interested in the entrepreneurial aspect. Ethan contributed little. His gaze wandering from face to face, he noticed Aisha's laptop bag stuffed with electronics, Liam's scribbled notes about software development, and Carlos's enthusiastic talk about hacking competitions. His heart sank. Could any of them be the courier? The thought felt disloyal. Unable to contain his turmoil, Ethan excused himself. He took out his phone and stared at Grant's number. Should he call, ask for more information? Or was this entire situation some elaborate ploy? Maybe even another form of racial profiling. Ethan paced the hallway, flipping the slip of paper in his hand. Finally, he tapped the number. It rang several times before going to voicemail. He hung up, frustrated. He realized he didn't even know exactly what he should ask. Who am I suspecting? Why, this was madness. He decided to dig a bit on his own, at least see if any of his new friends acted strangely. The next day, the leadership program visited the tech incubator on Chicago's north side. It was a bustling space filled with bright young entrepreneurs, coding wizards, and AI experts. The walls were lined with motivational quotes, and the air buzzed with innovation. During a presentation on data security, Ethan's mind drifted toward Officer Grant's words, someone traveling with a coded flash drive. Could this be the environment where such a flash drive was meant to be exchanged? After the session, the group dispersed to explore the facility's labs. Aisha, who was enthralled by cybersecurity, stuck around to ask questions about encryption. Carlos found a robotics corner and started geeking out over mechanical limbs. Liam, on the other hand, broke off with a couple of new acquaintances from the program. Ethan decided to roam aimlessly. He turned a corner and found himself in a dimly lit corridor. A door at the end was slightly ajar, leading to a small lounge area. Peering in, he saw Liam hunched over a laptop, whispering to someone on a phone call. Curiosity piqued. Ethan slowly approached. He caught snippets of Liam's hushed conversation. "The files are huge." "Yes, I'm transferring them now." "No, they won't suspect a thing. I'll bring it to the next location." Ethan's heart pounded. Could Liam be the one Officer Grant was warning about? The friendly, somewhat shy boy from Seattle. It was hard to reconcile the possibility. Yet the covert conversation, the mention of files and the secrecy, set off alarm bells. He backed away quietly, debating if he should confront Liam. Maybe it was innocent, some side project or personal matter. But the words, "they won't suspect a thing," didn't sound innocent at all. He rejoined the main group, mind spinning with confusion. Suddenly, a shrill alarm echoed through the incubator, causing a stir among the visitors. Staff members rushed around, telling everyone to stay calm. One of the administrators announced that a security breach had been detected in the network. "All visitors, please return to the lobby. We're investigating a possible data theft." Ethan's stomach twisted. Could this be the moment he scanned for Liam, who was nowhere to be seen? Could he have triggered the breach? A cold sweat formed on Ethan's brow. The puzzle pieces aligned in a disturbing picture. It seemed like Officer Grant's tip was real, and the culprit might be someone Ethan called a friend. In the chaotic aftermath of the breach, the entire leadership group was ushered onto a bus back to the academy. Organizers apologized profusely for cutting the visit short. On the drive, the students murmured anxiously about the alarm, speculating on hackers or malicious insiders. Liam sat 2 rows behind Ethan, staring out the window, looking oddly serene. Ethan felt a rising urge to confront Liam, but how could he do it without solid evidence? He considered texting Grant, but the notion of trusting him was still unsettling. Yet the sense of moral responsibility weighed heavily. He couldn't just let a friend, if Liam truly was behind this, get away with something harmful or illegal. Back at the academy, the evening session was cancelled, allowing students to relax. But Ethan couldn't relax. He paced his dorm room, while Carlos played video games, oblivious to Ethan's internal storm. Finally, Ethan slipped out and headed for the lounge, hoping to find Liam alone. He found Liam on a sofa, scrolling through his phone. Summoning courage, Ethan approached. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. "About what happened at the tech incubator. That was wild, right?" Liam's eyes flicked up. There was a guarded look in them. "Yeah, crazy day." Ethan swallowed hard. "Listen, I heard you in the lounge area before the alarm went off. You were on a phone call, talking about files you needed to transfer. Is everything okay?" A flicker of panic flashed across Liam's face before he schooled it into a neutral expression. "Oh, that." He let out a forced laugh. "Just some personal stuff. Old files from my dad's company. He wants me to help with some data entry. Nothing nefarious, if that's what you're implying." Ethan studied him, noting how Liam's hands trembled slightly. "All right," he said, forcing a nod. "Just wanted to make sure." He walked away, heart hammering. Liam's explanation didn't feel right. The tension in his voice, the too quick dismissal, it all raised more doubts than it answered. That night, Ethan struggled to sleep. He tossed and turned, haunted by the day's events. Finally, around midnight, he decided to take a walk. Slipping out of his room, he tiptoed through the dark corridor, mindful of the posted curfew. Reaching the common area, he was startled to see a light glowing in one of the adjoining study rooms. Curiosity overcame him, and he approached quietly, peeking inside. There, Liam sat alone at a computer, eyes flicking between the screen and a small flash drive plugged into the USB port. Ethan's adrenaline spiked. This must be the moment of truth. He took a cautious step inside, clearing his throat loudly to announce his presence. Liam jolted upright, nearly knocking over his soda can. Ethan." Liam stammered. "You scared me." Ethan nodded at the computer. "Couldn't sleep, so I went for a walk." "You." Liam fidgeted. "Same. I just wanted to get some work done." He moved to close the files, but Ethan caught a glimpse of the screen lines of complex code, followed by what looked like confidential documents referencing financial transactions, corporate secrets, maybe even government contracts. It was a labyrinth of data that made no sense to Ethan. In a flash of insight, Ethan recalled the words, "someone traveling with a coded flash drive." This was it, the flash drive Liam was using. "Liam," Ethan said, voice tense. What is all that panic flared in Liam's eyes? It's nothing." "Look, man, I can explain." "Explain." "Then," Ethan pressed, stepping closer. "Are you stealing data?" Liam's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Finally, he exhaled. "I didn't steal it exactly. Someone gave it to me to transport. I was told it would help expose corruption. Whistleblower stuff. I swear I'm not doing it for money, just to help. But I guess some shady folks found out about it and I got spooked." Ethan's mind reeled. Could Liam be telling the truth? Or was this just another lie? "Did you cause the breach at the tech incubator?" Liam swallowed. "I was trying to upload the files to a secure server. Guess I tripped an alarm. If I'd managed to upload everything, it would have been out in the open. Evidence of corporate greed, maybe government collusion. Ethan, I'm not a bad guy. I'm trying to do something good here. But it's complicated." Ethan took a shaky breath, torn between disbelief and empathy. "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why do it in secret?" Liam's eyes flicked downward. "Because I don't know who I can trust. People with power, they cover things up. I was told I might be in danger if I told the wrong person." Memories of Officer Grant's warning about stolen information flooded Ethan's mind. He remembered how easy it was for stereotypes to paint an innocent person as guilty. Yet here was Liam apparently in possession of illicit data. A swirl of anxiety twisted in Ethan's gut. What now? Ethan stepped closer, voice quivering with a mix of fear and resolve. "Liam, you need to turn this over to the proper authorities. Doing it under the radar is making you a target, and you're putting the rest of us in danger too." Liam shook his head. "I tried, but no one would listen. The only folks interested are the ones who want to bury it or exploit it. That's why I had to do it myself." Before Ethan could respond, the door behind them slammed open. Officer Grant stood there, breathing heavily, sweat beading on his brow. "Step away from the computer," he barked, training his eyes on Liam. Ethan reeled in shock. How Grant held up a phone indicating Ethan's missed call attempts. "I decided to come check things out myself. Seems like I got here just in time." Liam's eyes widened. "Who are you?" "Security," Grant said tersely, pulling out a pair of handcuffs from his belt. Ethan noticed he wore a badge that wasn't TSA, maybe a local security license or a cooperative arrangement. Kid, you're in possession of stolen files. Hand over that flash drive. Liam clutched the drive protectively. I'm not handing it to some random guard. This data is bigger than you. It exposes corruption corporations, maybe even law enforcement. Grant's gaze hardened. We'll see. If it's legit, the authorities will take it from here. If you resist, I'll have no choice but to place you under citizen's arrest until the police arrive. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. A heavy silence stretched in the room. Liam looked to Ethan. Desperation etched in his features. Ethan, you believe me, don't you? This is bigger than me. I'm trying to do the right thing. Ethan's pulse thundered. He looked between Grant and Liam, both staring at him, awaiting his judgment. Officer Grant was far from perfect, but maybe he was here to rectify the mistakes of the past. Liam was a friend, sort of, but possibly entangled in something dangerous. The moral crossroads was dizzying. At last Ethan spoke, voice trembling but firm. Liam, if this is real, you need to do it the right way. Hiding it only makes you look guilty. Tears glistened in Liam's eyes. Reluctantly, he placed the flash drive on the table and stepped back. Grant grabbed it, slipping it into a secure pouch. Liam sank onto a nearby chair, burying his face in his hands, whispering, I only wanted to help. I didn't want to hurt anyone. Within minutes, local law enforcement arrived, alerted by Grant, and took Liam into custody for questioning. The Leadership Academy staff were roused from their beds in shock. Students peered from doorways, whispering rumors about espionage. Ethan stood in the hallway, heart aching, with the weight of betrayal and pity. Officer Grant approached him before leaving with the police. You did the right thing, he said quietly. I'll make sure this is handled properly. Sometimes even good intentions need oversight to avoid disaster. Ethan nodded numbly, still reeling from the rapid turn of events. The following week was a haze of interrogation and speculation. The Academy held emergency meetings, clarifying that the leadership program itself was not under suspicion. Liam's situation was personal, unrelated to the official curriculum. Rumors spread that the stolen files indeed pointed to high-level corporate wrongdoing, possibly even crooked government deals. Investigations were underway. Ethan felt conflicted. He mourned the loss of a friend, someone who might genuinely have been a whistleblower. Yet he also recognized the danger in the method Liam chose, which nearly jeopardized the entire program and the students involved. Grandma Loretta's letter became a source of solace. Late at night, Ethan reread her words about perseverance, about letting love guide him. He realized that even well-intentioned deeds can spiral into chaos if done in secrecy or desperation. Officer Grant reached out once more, sending a text to confirm that Ethan was safe. It was surreal receiving a cordial message from the man who once humiliated him. Ethan wasn't sure how to feel, part gratitude, part lingering resentment, but he replied politely, acknowledging that he appreciated the heads-up. News broke that the top executives implicated in the stolen data scandal were scrambling to deny wrongdoing. But the evidence was stacked against them. Eventually, federal investigators charged multiple high-ranking officials in an international money laundering scheme. The company's stocks plummeted and lawsuits piled up. Meanwhile, the TSA launched its own internal review of how tips were being handled at airports. Officer Grant's actions, his bias in singling out a black teenager, did not go unnoticed. Complaints from witnesses at JFK, combined with Ethan's statement, triggered an investigation into systemic profiling. A few higher-ups lost their positions, and new training procedures were mandated. Grant himself faced disciplinary action for operating outside his jurisdiction in Chicago. However, he was granted leniency upon revealing crucial evidence that helped expose the deeper corruption behind the forged tip. Nonetheless, he was reassigned to a desk job, losing much of his field authority. It was a bittersweet ending for him. He had done the right thing eventually, but not without significant repercussions. Ethan heard about Grant's reassignment through Anthony Russell, who kept tabs on the case. Hearing that the officer who profiled him was no longer at JFK brought a measure of closure. Karma, in its own circuitous way, had delivered consequences to all those who acted on prejudice or deception. The remainder of the leadership program flew by. Without Liam, the group dynamics shifted. Aisha, Carlos, and Ethan grew closer, bonding over late-night talks about justice and empathy. They rallied to ensure that the fiasco didn't define their experience. Instead, it became a lesson about accountability, ethical action, and the dangers of hidden agendas. On the final day, the Academy hosted a graduation ceremony. Ethan stood on stage, proudly receiving his completion certificate. Applause filled the auditorium, and he spotted Anthony Russell in the crowd giving a thumbs up. When Ethan returned to his seat, his eyes brimmed with tears of gratitude for the journey. The heartbreak, the betrayal, the prejudice, none of it could overshadow the growth he'd experienced. In a final reflective essay, Ethan wrote about how leadership was not just about grand gestures or bold activism, but also about moral clarity, humility, and the willingness to speak up in tense moments. He shared a snippet of his grandmother's letter, the part about love and perseverance. Faculty members were moved, describing his reflection as a testament to resilience. A week later, Ethan stood at Chicago O'Hare, preparing to return to New York. As he walked to his gate, memories of JFK lingered, but now he held his boarding pass with quiet confidence, refusing to let those past moments define him. An announcement called passengers to board. Ethan stepped onto the jet bridge, heart fluttering with relief and nostalgia. Just weeks ago, he'd flown in wide-eyed and uncertain. Now he was stronger, wiser. During the flight, he stared out at the clouds, thinking of everything Grant Liam the program, and how truth had triumphed. Life had a way of blending pain with hope. At JFK, no one stopped him. No stares, no suspicion. He retrieved his suitcase and found Grandma Loretta waiting, arms wide open. They hugged tightly. In the taxi, he shared a condensed version of events. Loretta held his hand. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. Ethan nodded. "I realized people might judge you unfairly, but you can't let that define who you are." Loretta smiled. "You've grown." Outside, the city lights glowed. But inside, Ethan carried a light of his own born from struggle, love, and the courage to speak up. Thank you for joining us on this emotional roller coaster, a journey where suspicion meets truth and prejudice faces the power of compassion. Through Ethan's eyes, we've witnessed how a single act of racial profiling can ripple into life-changing consequences for everyone involved. We've also seen how, with perseverance and empathy, even the darkest moments can spark new beginnings. If Ethan's story resonated with you, if you felt the sting of injustice or the warmth of redemption, we invite you to be a part of our community. Please like this video to show your support. Share it so more people can learn from Ethan's experiences, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that challenge perspectives and inspire change. Because in the end, it's not just about telling a story. It's about coming together to create a world where everyone is seen, heard, and respected.